Hello everyone, welcome to week 1 lecture videos, and this is learning objective 2. In the first learning objective, we discussed what our investment philosophy is and how it's important. So as a part of that, we identified 3 personal characteristics being embedded within a philosophy. Following this, in the second learning objective, we will discuss the personal characteristics that need to be considered when deriving an investment philosophy. So there are 3 main personal characteristics that investor needs to take account. The first one is risk. An investor needs to consider the risk-return trade-off and their own preferences for risk. Now, what we know that investors have a range of different appetites for risk. Some investors are highly risk averse, which means they will only willing to take on risky assets if they are rewarded with an extremely high return. Other investors, on the other hand, are less risk averse, so they are more inclined to invest in risky assets. Hence, they not need to be rewarded with such high return in order to doing so. So you need to determine your own degree of risk aversion. Some investment philosophies are inherently more risky than others. So if you are highly risk averse, so you should not invest in a philosophy that requires that appetite for risk. Now it's actually quite difficult to evaluate an investor's risk appetite. You can do this by taking a survey, or you can consider your own historical investment patterns and use that to identify your own risk appetite. But as a general rule, the more risk-averse investors, risk aversion means you do not like risk, you should invest in a portfolio that has less risky asset. The second issue of personalized investment philosophy is a time horizon. Investor needs to identify how long they are going to invest. Some investors who have patience to hold investment for long period of time, while others not. The investors might have, for example, need cash for short term, whereas some others may not. I'll take a good example of 2 investors that are in 2 different stages of their life cycle. For example, one, a young 25-year-old investor who is putting money away toward the superannuation to be able to pay for the retirement, say in 40 years of time. Whereas another investor who is a 65-year-old who is entering into retirement. So he's looking for a short-term investment, something that can be drawn down as they enter into retirement. Now, these 2 investors are going to have different approaches to how they go about their investment, about their investing their money. And one particular point is to note that they should also have different degree of risk aversion. That if you have got a shorter time horizon, you can ill afford a short-term drawdown in investment. Whereas if you have a very long time horizon, like the 25-year-old in the example, so you have 40 years to invest, so short-term drawdowns not a big issue for these investors. So the general rule is if you got a long time horizon for investment, you can invest in greater proportion of your wealth in risk investment. The third thing to consider here is the tax status of an investor. So investors are only concerned about their after-tax returns. Therefore, taxes do have an effect on portfolio composition. We know, for example, in Australia, there is a tax system known as imputation tax system, and that tax system results on dividends and capital gains being taxed differently. In a nutshell, what we find is that because dividends are taxed at investors' personal marginal income tax rate, then investors who have a lower income tax rate, such as retirees, for example, going to prefer an investment strategy that have higher cash dividends versus those investors who are in the top tax bracket that have high marginal income tax rate. Other factors about tax to consider is where you domicile. So rules could be different for domestic versus international investor. That might also have an impact on portfolio composition. One complicating factor is you need to consider in terms of tax status and how they affect is, for example, the different tax rates on different proportion of an investor savings. For example, in Australia, there is a concessionary discount tax applied on superannuation. That might mean that the tax treatment of superannuation differs from the tax treatment of other savings. Hence, the philosophy for investing in this two different proportion of one's wealth might differ even when we are looking at the same individual. So we also have to consider that tax rate may change across time and tax policies might change. So one could consider these factors. So in summary, we have looked at three key characteristics that investors need to consider when they're forming their investment. So their degree of risk aversion, their time horizon, and their taxes. So that's learning objective 2. Please watch the next video for learning objective 3. Thank you.